Hey everybody, I'm Julian Bucknall, the CTO here at DevExpress, and welcome to the 19.2 launch week. And in particular, today's webinar, JavaScript, jQuery, Angular, React, and Vue, presented by DevExpress Web Program Manager Mehul and DevExpress Technical Evangelist Don Wibier. In today's session, Mehul and Don will detail the features we expect to ship for our JavaScript product line in version 19.2. This session is being recorded and will be available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later on today. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in your GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Mehul and Don.
Thank you very much, Julian, and welcome everyone to, as Julian mentioned, what's new in version 19.2 for JavaScript, jQuery, Angular, React, and Vue. And with me, I have my colleague, as usual, Don. How are you today, Don?
I'm good, Mehul. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So like Don and I did a couple of days ago for the What's New in ASP.NET webinar, today we're continuing that theme of bringing you information and the latest news and updates about our web components, but this time we are covering the client side. So we covered all the server-side stuff a couple of days ago in the ASP.NET webinar, and today it's all about the client side, and there is a lot. So let's get into it. Now today, as I mentioned, we are going to be covering all the client side, but we're also going to cover a little bit of the DevExtreme core, which supports our DevExtreme MVC controls and ASP.NET core controls, and some news about them as well, because a lot of you, of course, are doing all this wonderful client-side stuff in Visual Studio, and there's some benefits for doing scaffolding and API stuff with core that I'm sure you can take advantage of. So today, Don and I will be working off of the What's New item. Now, if you're not sure what this is, if you go to devexpress.com/new, this is where you'll find the landing page for the latest release. So whatever the latest release is, you'll find here the information. Now, this is a well-prepared landing page that has links to blog posts and demos and all that good stuff. And today, if you take a look under Web Controls, jQuery, Angular, React, is where you'll find a lot of this news. Now, it doesn't have every minute detail. You can find that if you go to My Downloads and you click on the version number. There's usually a What's New document there as well. However, that is probably something similar to what you might create, which is like developer notes, but it is definitely more detail-oriented. That might have links to specific support items that refer to why we're fixing something and all that good stuff. So this is the snazzy marketing landing page that we work hard on. So we're proud to show it off. Okay, Don, let's just dive into it. What is happening for DevExtreme JavaScript controls in version 19.2?
Well, Mehul, let's start with one of the controls that we introduced in the last release, which is the diagram control. And the diagram control is still in CTP. And what that means is it is a community technical preview. That means that we are not entirely done with it. But nevertheless, we have added quite a bunch of features in this release as well, which I'd like to go over with you. So, for instance, the first thing which is nice to mention is that we now support images inside shapes. So if you check out a diagram with like an org chart, you can actually have the people inside, the photos of the people inside the shapes. One of the other really cool things that we have is we now have collapsible containers. And that is particularly useful when you have a large diagram and you want to get some of the diagram out of the way. You can now group several shapes in a container, and the container is collapsible as well. And as you can see in the demo, it will also work with nested containers. So a really slick feature here. Another thing that we've done is we have added some new data binding capabilities. And the data binding capabilities allow you to bind pretty much everything in the chart to a data store. So that starts with the shapes and text inside the shapes, but also the connectors, colors, etc., etc. You name it, it's all bindable now with this 19.2 release. A couple of other things that we have done is there is now the possibility to have a read-only mode, as well as a full screen and a simple view mode. And we have done some UI customization. So what we've done here is we have added a new API that allows you to toggle the visibility and specify the content of a number of UI elements. For instance, the context menu, the properties panel, the toolbar, as well as the toolbox. And another interesting thing here is that we have now the possibility to export a shape to SVG, PNG, and JPEG. And we support zoom, as well as auto zoom, as well as auto layout, which is obviously useful when you want to chart something out of a database. Then we'll lay it out by default for you. So some very nice features here, and yeah, please check them out and also let us know what you think of it.
Excellent. Yeah, it's such excellent features, tons of them. And even as Don mentioned, that even though it is still a CTP, we believe that it is useful. We are looking for your feedback. So please give it a try in whichever platform you prefer. Everything from jQuery, Angular, Vue, and React, and of course, ASP.NET Core and MVC as well. All right, and also one of the things is, as Don mentioned, it supports different binding scenarios, including a web API service, and you can see examples of this and how to data bind this as well. All right, Don, in 19.2, we also have a new widget for JavaScript, and that is the Gantt control, the Gantt component. So this new Gantt component, of course, works for Angular, React, Vue, and jQuery. And what's nice is that a Gantt control allows you to display hierarchical information, such as work schedules or project schedules. Now, typically, you will find a Gantt chart in some project software because it really is a great visual representation to display not just project items as well as timelines. So here you can see we've taken our tree control or tree list control and some aspects of our grid and combined them in this excellent client-side control. And what's nice is like the diagram, you can zoom in and zoom out. So if I hold down control, I can zoom right in or zoom right out to see all of the project items. And then I can also, for example, using this, collapse and expand items as well. So really excellent, powerful features. Now, we also in this release have added the ability to resize and modify tasks, change dependencies between tasks, edit cell values. So for example, I can come in here, click on a cell value and quickly edit it. We have support for change history, region resizing, real-time scaling, and we also provide a task selection API. So you can read all about this in this excellent documentation. So what's nice is all of those features that I mentioned are well documented. We even have documentation on how to set up DevExpress or configure a widget for different platforms. So you can see just how to use this. So everything is covered here, methods, events, as well as, of course, the new diagram is covered here as well. Now, once again, I will mention this is a CTP, which means we have more plans. So we are not finished with it. So, of course, we have a couple of items we'd like to add, update, modify. So when you see the label CTP, just know that we'd like you to use it, we'd like feedback, but we may change around some of those API items that I was just showing. So for example, if you see some method name, generally certain things will not get changed like export because that's pretty common. However, if we've selected a name like active state enabled and somebody decides, hey, we changed how that works and maybe it's better to call it something else, we will do that. So that's just what CTP means, is that we're still actively working on the API as well as the features, and it's going to get to a final stage where it will be excellent. All right, Don, what else is happening for DevExtreme?
We also recently introduced one of my favorite controls, which is the file manager control. And well, we introduced that as a CDP as well. And with 19.2, it is still in CDP. But I can tell you, we have added a couple of really nice UI enhancements here. This is absolutely really, really well done. So for instance, we have introduced pop-up notification messages. And what that means is that if you, for instance, upload a file or do some other file operation, you'll get a nice little pop-up which tells you whether the operation has succeeded or failed. And if it is like a big file, you'll get like a progress bar. And in this case, what you see is that there was an error because we obviously have disabled uploading of files on our demo site. But besides that, we also have enhanced our refresh toolbar item. And that also indicates whether file operations have succeeded or failed. And the last nice thing here is, as you can see, we have implemented a side panel which will collect all the individual file operations for the entire batch that you were going to do. Yeah, so some really nice UI elements here. And together with that, we have also included an integrated splitter in case you want to resize the folder or the file pane, basically. So that is a new feature here as well. And yeah, obviously, one of the most dangerous thing on your web application is file uploading altogether. So we have done a couple of file validation enhancements to make uploading more secure as it already was. For instance, you can now specify a number of file extensions that are allowed to be uploaded. And you can also specify the upload size, the maximum upload size. So you can reduce the risk here and there when doing file uploads. One of the other things that we've done is that we have added a download files button in the toolbar. So once you click that, you can actually download the whole batch of files in one go. Or you can select one file and hit the download button, and then you'll be downloading that file without having the actual link somewhere in the file manager. And together with the download files button, we also have included the possibility to do some toolbar and context menu customization. So if you have any particular things that aren't default for the file manager, you can actually now add them in the toolbar or in the context menu. We have an API for that. So very convenient as well. A couple of other smaller things to mention is that we also have support for custom file providers now. And well, if you have some file systems stored in a database which isn't like the stuff that we're already supporting, but if you have like another structure and you want to navigate through it with the file manager, you can do so by implementing this custom file provider. And in case, I mean, we've given a demo in the last What's New webinar about files storing on Azure Blob Storage. We have done a small improvement there as well. In case you upload a file, it will not first be transferred to the server, but it will directly be uploaded to the storage provider. So that's just an enhancement there. And also together with the file validation enhancements is that we have now made it possible that you can access the file bytes on the client side. So in case you want to check the actual file bytes for a signature or whatsoever, you can actually do so now by accessing those file bytes on the client side. So some very nice additions here. But Mehul, let's get to our main controls here.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Don is referring to is some of the most popular controls for almost any platform, and that happens to be the data grid and tree list. Now, I mention this because these are just so useful. And in this release, we have added a couple of really useful features. Now, the first is the ability to reorder records and nodes. So both the data grid and tree list have these features. So let's take a look. Now, in the grid, I can take a row and simply move it around. As you can see, I'm grabbing the row from this dotted ellipsis items here and simply moving it around to any other item. Now, same thing for the tree. Now, the tree you can see a little bit more. So, for example, let's say I want to move Davy Jones here from shipping assistant and promote them up to IT manager. I can do that. I can just drag the item and drop it into another area, and you can see it easily updates as well. So, excuse me. So it's a nice feature. Now, it's a very intuitive, very smooth, and of course, it works across all these platforms for the data grid and tree list. Now, this feature is actually enabled because of another overall feature that we've added that I'll talk about a little bit later for all the UI components. So you may be excited and say, wow, this drag and drop looks good. And drag and drop in general was something that I was looking forward to with the DevExpress controls. So we've got a little bit of news about that. So, but first, let's talk a little bit more about the data grid and tree list. Now, we've also added the ability to display sort indices for multiple column sorting. So what that means is, as you can see, I am sorting now by first name and last name. And I know this because I've got the indicator here as well as a number to show me which one is first and second. Now, because your end users can use multiple sorting, what we can do is, let's say, for example, if I sort by state here, by ascending or descending, I've given that arrow that tells me. But if I hold down Shift and then also select other rows, then you can see how exactly the grid is prioritizing them and what comes first and what sort order they're using. So it's a really nice feature to show within the column headers to see when you've got multiple column sorting. Now, you can enable it to visually display the sort order for your end users, deactivate the sorting show sort index option to hide the sort indices. So it's very configurable as well. Okay, now let's also mention a couple of enhancements that we've done for asynchronous API. Now, you can take a look at actually what's new, but in this release, we've enabled asynchronous event handlers for set cell value, init no row, and row validating. So some improvements. So as you saw in 19.1, we did some really great asynchronous API enhancements for a lot of the controls. Well, we're continuing that theme here by adding these new events that you can take advantage of. All right, and finally, I want to talk about the export to Excel API enhancements. Now, this was introduced in 19.1, and it is still CTP because we are not finished with it, but we've added some new features. So let's take a look at that. Now, in this release, we've added the ability to export only selected rows. So let's say I only want to export these two rows. And what's also nice is I can export with the source column width. So if I've got a different column width that I've set for any of these any of these columns, that will be done as well. Now, in addition, the group header, group footer, and total footer are also exported with highlighted text. Therefore, if it's bolded or something like that. So let's take a look now. So I want to see if it only exports those items. Now, first and foremost, I've got this nice little menu that says, do I want to export all data or only the selected rows? Well, of course, we'll for demonstration purposes, do selected rows. And now when I bring it up here, as you can see, it only exported the selected rows and kept that beautiful formatted text, highlighted text for us as well. Now, what's excellent about this is that typically you'd have to create a report to get something that looks really good. But now, right from the dynamic data grid, your end users can quickly export and get something. Now, at the end of the day, I do want to say I'm not saying reports are not the way to go. If you want a really well-formatted layout, report is still going to be the best way to do this. But what's nice is that right from the grid that you can export and it looks fantastic. Now, one final thing to mention is we've also extended the customized cell callback argument set. So you can access all properties of the data grid cell object within the callback. So that is another nice feature. Now, from the what's new, I'd also recommend you take a look at the view code examples by individual use case. So we said, you know what, our customers are doing all sorts of exporting with some really interesting ways. For example, they might insert a logo when they're exporting to Excel. They may want to specify a custom format for a group summary item. And these all are based on feedback we've gotten. And as you can see, there's a ton of these examples. So definitely take a look, because we probably have an example for you on exporting based on a lot of your feedback and questions and all that good stuff. Okay, Don, what else is happening for DevExtreme data visualization?
Well, Mehul, we have added a couple of customization features here as well. Let's start with those. One of the things that you can customize now is that you are the annotations. So as you can see, we now have nice annotations with some rich media in there, and you can actually use a template to format it. So you can include images and all kinds of rich media inside the annotation. The same is happening for the donut chart. So if you want to put some text in the middle of the donut chart, well, it is not restricted to text anymore. You can actually now, in this particular example, put a nice image of the flag in there, just to make the chart more clearer for your end user. The same goes for tooltip customization. So if you would check out the tooltips on a pie chart here, you'll see that you can include rich media as well. The last thing that we've done to do some customization is the custom legend item markers. So in this case, if you check out the diagram and you check out the legend, you'll now be able to put a little image in there as well, or something else, because it's all customizable now. So a couple of really nice things on the customization part of the charts. What we also have done is we have managed, you are now able to manage the chart's pane size if you check out a chart which has several charts in there. So as you can see here, we have two charts combined in one control, and you can now actually specify the pane of the individual charts here. Then we also included a couple of other things here, which does not necessarily have anything to do with how your chart looks. But one of the things that we've done is we have added the possibility to display negative values for logarithmic scales. And what we've also done is we have put in an option for discrete aggregation. And with this, we have added a new aggregate by category option, and when this is used, the option changes the way that our chart widget aggregates discrete data. Then I think the last thing to show here is that we have now support for zooming inside a polar chart. And the demo has a really nice, it's actually a really nice demo, because we have this range control, and if you change the range, you'll see that the polar chart is zooming in or out, depending on what you're selecting on the range control. So some very nice additions here as well.
Excellent, Don. Thank you. And definitely check out all of these links. We have links to these demos that we just showed, as well as the documentation and any enhancements to even the vector map coordination translation API. All right. So let's also quickly mention, Don, we've had an update to the themes, which is that you can now do custom CSS bundles. So what's nice about this is that you can see, for example, that you can now bundle CSS styles for UI components used within your application. So you can create multiple bundles of different DevExtreme color swatches, which contain different component sets. So as you can see, that we can create that using command line. There's lots of good examples of this. And if you're not familiar with the color swatches, in essence, it lets you create specific themes where one side is dark, one side is light, and it may have different color sets and all that good stuff. So color swatches are fantastic. Okay, Don, let's now move and talk about the UI widgets, and specifically, we've done a bunch of improvements, but the first thing I want to talk about is this new drag and drop utilities. So we now ship a new drag and drop utilities library that you can implement a custom drag and drop functionality. Now, this was, of course, came from customer feedback. And so you might say, well, customer feedback, where do I put that? Where does that come from? Well, as you know, DevExtreme lives on GitHub. What I mean by that is we actively develop on GitHub, and you can actually engage with us right on GitHub and say, hey, listen, I want this feature. I found this bug, et cetera, et cetera. All sorts of good stuff that you can engage with us on there. And as you can see, a lot of these features are actually being discussed actively there. So I highly recommend you get involved because you are interacting directly with the team. This is your opportunity to say, you know what, DevExtreme, you really need to provide a library for drag and drop, or you need a better way. So we said, yeah, this is our problem, and this is our proposed solution. We're going to make a couple of components called draggable and sortable, and they allow you to handle these operations. And here's the API we're going to make. And so what was great is, we had a poll and everything, and customer said, okay, this is good, that's bad, et cetera, et cetera. I found a bug, and we fixed it, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll add the 19.2 or whatever label we do that says, yes, this is where it's going to be done. So I recommend you do this because a lot of these features come from that. But we did get feedback where customers said, hey, we'd really like you to make a Kanban widget. And so we've done that by creating this sortable widget that allows you to reorder elements. And so what we've created is this fantastic little demo that essentially recreates what you'd find something in Trello that says, listen, I've got an item in this list, but I need to move it here. So I'll just drag and drop it there. And this one I'm going to move over here. And you can see it's very smooth. It's very nice. It works great. I'm using it in Chrome, but of course we test across several browsers, and it works great across all of them. So this new library, what's great about it is obviously it supports several different components like data grid and so forth. However, it also works across components. So what's nice is, for example, you can take a look in the what's new as well, and we'll get links to these demos. But what's great is the API allows you to incorporate cross-component drag and drop support. So what does that look like? Well, for example, here you can see I've got a list here, and it's got the scheduler. And if I want to take items here, from the scheduler, if I want to drop items into the scheduler, I can do that easily by dragging them and dropping them right here. So as you can see, we can build a really powerful, intuitive UIs for our customers that they say, oh, this is exactly how I expect it to work. This is exactly what I've been looking for. I want to just simply grab an item and say, you know what? I want to create icons for the website on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Great. That's now a scheduled appointment, and it's being represented. Now, it's not just supported in the scheduler. It's also supported within lists as well. So as you can see, I've got a couple of lists here. I can move items around. And as you saw earlier, that we've got the Kanban as well as you can do it with 2 grids. And this is actually a very common scenario. I remember this all the way back from, let's say, even a decade ago, when people are asking, how can I drag and drop items between 2 grids in ASP.NET? So it's a very common scenario because it comes up quite a bit where you have a couple of grids of items. And what's great is these are all client-side controls. So this is happening completely on the client side, only re-render when necessary. So as you can see, it's fast, it's updating very efficiently, and all that good stuff. Okay, Don, what else is happening for the UI widgets?
Well, Mehul, actually, this is one of my other favorite controls, and it's about the data form. For all of you who are not familiar with the data form, if you hate creating forms, you actually should check this control out, because you'll bind an object to the form and it will create a form according to the properties. But anyway, one of the things that we've done in this release is that you are now able to modify the form on the fly without doing a full re-render of the entire form. So as you can see in the demo, if you hit the Add Phone button, then another phone item will be added to the form, and this is done by only updating that particular area of the screen. So not a full re-render of the form, and yeah, this makes your UI experience just a bit smoother here. So a nice enhancement on the data form controls.
Excellent. Right, so now let's talk about one of my favorite buttons, and that is the floating action button. So what this is a button that is a primary action button, and you have likely seen it if you've used one of the Google products like, Google Calendar or something like that. And it's a fantastic button. It's really useful because it's versatile. So what it can do is, of course, you can have it, as you can see, it's floating over the grid here. And when I hit it, it says add new row. So it brings up the add new row. Now, what we've done in this release is we've added a few excellent upgrades, and that is the ability to add a label to an action, hide an action, reorder actions, and expand the speed dial menu in a different location. So what that means is, if you're not familiar, besides being able to just open an action like at this editor, you can also have it create a speed dial. So let's say I select a row, and as you can see, the button now changes, and when I click on it, you can see I've got this modal sort of menu that pops up and says, okay, now what do you want to do with this row? Do you want to edit it, delete it, or add a row? And like I said, in this release, we can change the speed, expand the speed dial menu in a different direction. So if we don't want it to go from the bottom up, we can change that direction as well. All right, so fantastic update. I highly recommend taking a look at those. And now, Don, I believe we have some upgrades for asynchronous as well for UI components?
Exactly. And this is obviously one of the things which is familiar for most MVC developers, I guess. This is also a feature that comes with MVC. We now have support for asynchronous validation. So if you do model validation, as I guess most of you guys do, you can now actually specify the asynchronous validation attribute here and, for instance, check whether that email address is already in the database instead of doing it when submitting the form. So just a small little touch, which is very useful. And that's now available with the DevExpress controls as well.
Excellent. Yeah, those are really useful, excellent features. I mean, when you need to validate an email that is while continuing and you don't want to hold up the user, that's a great little asynchronous event that you can just kick off and double check. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Angular, Don. And as you know, we have a full set of Angular components. So if you go to js.devexpress.com, you can click on this little Angular logo and find our 65 plus excellent responsive touch enabled widgets. And the world of Angular keeps evolving and doing bigger, better things. And recently, in I believe June, July or something this summer, they released Angular IV. So what Angular IV, and if you want to read about this blog post, essentially just go to blog.angular.io, angular.io and click on blog, and you can see all their blog info. But they mentioned Angular IO has a bunch of upgrades. And what's nice is in this release, we are supporting Angular IV. So hooray. And second, that means you get benefits for performance and bundle size. So what Angular IV has improved is bundling. So before IV, you'd get this large bundle, and afterwards, a much smaller bundle. And in the world of JavaScript, where you have to download a lot of bundles, each kilobyte matters, each byte matters. So it's a very nice upgrade. And what's great is you will see performance upgrades with DevExpress and Angular IV. So definitely upgrade to this latest release to get those enhancements if you're using Angular or Angular IV. Okay, Don, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about React.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan to me. Well, and you might wonder, okay, so we have DevExpress, which is like the set of the 60 plus controls which are available for Angular, Vue, React, and jQuery. But we also happen to have a set with native React controls. And we started doing those controls before we actually supported like all those major platforms for the whole DevExpress set. And also for the native React controls, so they are written from the ground on up. That's also the reason that they are not at the same level as the normal DevExpress controls. We've written them from the ground on up. You can do anything concerning templates and all the good stuff that come with React. And for that, we have also added a couple of features on the native React controls. And one of the controls that we have done a small update on is the native React chart control. What we have introduced now is that you can swap the X and the Y axis as needed. Yeah, so in this case, you'll see that we can actually swap them around and the chart will be updated immediately. And I think, Mehul, that we also did a couple of updates on the React data grids.
Yes, we did. So as Don mentioned, these are the native React components that we are talking about. Let's take a quick side note to talk real quick about it, because that is a very good thing to mention. Now, as Don mentioned, this was back in 2018. We made that decision and said, hey, we're going to make wrappers for it as well. So as Don said, we started with the native components and we are still working on them, but it takes time to make each component. So the wrappers obviously saves us time. And you might say, well, Mehul, are you just bringing wrappers so you'd have a full library? Partly yes, but we also found the performance is not that different. It's fairly close. And the biggest difference we find is in how the code looks rendered. So of course the wrapper is going to look more like DevExpress, and of course the native component is, since it's using all plugins, it's going to look more like native React code. So it all depends. The great news is you can use both of them together in React. So if you say, hey, I want to use the native React grid, but since you don't have XYZ component, but it's available as a wrapper for React, I'm going to use that version. So good news there. So you can read about this blog post. If you want this link, let me know. Honestly, I just Google it. I'll type in something like DevExpress React wrappers versus native, and this is the first thing that comes up. Okay, that said, as Don mentioned, we have upgrades to the native React grid in this release. And so what we've done is we've brought enhancements such as column size enhancements. So now you can set the column size M and using M and %CSS. So that's a nice upgrade to specify the column width. We also have virtual table enhancements. So for example, now with our virtual table plugin includes access and track table scroll position using an API, banded column mode, as well as lazy loading with record grouping enabled. And also we have in cell editing. So now you can, what's nice about this is simply click on a cell and start editing it. So for example, here I can type Paris and XYZ or something like that, whatever you like. But in cell editing is supported as soon as you click on a cell is clicked. Okay, we also have support for group row summary. Now, group row summary essentially allows you to see the summary information. So for example, if we take a look here, this is a group row, and now the group row summary will display summary information as well. Now, what else do we have happening for the native React components, which of course, live on our, if you go to github.com/DevExpress, this is where you'll find them. And under DevExtreme Reactive, this is what we're calling these components, sort of the reactive set of components. And we have links to the grid, the chart, and we also have a native React scheduler. And yes, it is in beta, and because we are still working on it. But so Don, what is happening with the native React scheduler?
Well, for the native React scheduler, we have done a couple of things. One of them was actually quite a quick win, but it will improve the end user experience quite a bit. And that is that we now have the possibility to have a today button on the date navigation pane. So if you want to switch over to today, you don't need to scroll or do anything, just hit the button and you're there. The other one is also very useful, but that's a bit more, which is the support for reoccurring appointments in the editing dialog. So if you would start editing one of the appointments, what you'll see is that you now have the possibility to select certain criteria for reoccurring appointments. And yeah, that makes the scheduler a bit more useful as it already was. As Mehul mentioned, it is still in beta, so we're far from finished with it, but some nice improvements on the 19.2 version of the native React scheduling control.
Excellent. All right, and now we're going to talk the last bit of information, and that is the Visual Studio integration. And we have done upgrades in 19.2 for our form scaffolding wizard. Now, those are 3 words that are magic, because essentially this saves you a ton of time. So we've added a form to the list of controls supported by our Visual Studio Scaffolding Wizard. And if you're not familiar with our Visual Studio Scaffolding Wizard, you can take a look once you have our installation installed in Visual Studio. You will see an option in there. So let's say you have an existing project and you say, I want to bring DevStream Angular, DevStream ASP.NET Core, or MVC, then you can easily do that. So for example, this scaffolding wizard that says, okay, I've got a project and I want to add an item. I have my database. I want a new scaffolded item. And if you're not familiar with scaffolding, essentially it says, let me take a look at the data and create a UI based around that and make sure it's bound as well. So several steps that are created that saves you a lot of time. So for example, here, you can see the Angular component has been done, and we have videos on this, and I believe we've done webinars on this in the past. But what's nice is this wizard gives you some option to create the name, set some settings, and once it's done, it will actually go and create the files for you. So if it's Angular, it will go and create the app module, TypeScript files, all that good stuff. Or if it's MVC or Core, it'll create those versions as well. So excellent updates in this release for those. Now, we also have asynchronous support in our API controller wizard. So what's great about this is we have improved our API scaffolding wizard so that you can better leverage the asynchronous capabilities of Entity Framework and Entity Framework Core. So the API control scaffolding wizard can generate asynchronous using async await code for controller actions. So it is fantastic. So as you can see, you can actually use this to create a web API service, and it'll be scaffolded and all that good stuff. So it's a very, very nice upgraded feature that you can create. Of course, MVC views and controls with it as well. As you can see, here's an example where we're using async and await to get some product information. All right, so with that said, let's stop here, hand it back to Julian, and see if we have any questions that the team has not answered yet.
Well, thank you, Mehul and Don. The team actually have been working stellarly in the background and answering questions as and when they came up. So everything looks pretty answered at the moment, I must admit. We're still answering a couple more. But yeah, it's looking good.
Awesome. Okay, well, let me see if there's any we can address. But as Julian has mentioned, the team is there, and you might say, "Wow, this is not your only option to access the team?" As I mentioned, the best way is to definitely get involved on GitHub, because that is perhaps the best way to, let's say, vote for items, because you can say, hey, I want to, thumbs up this feature. That's essentially like a vote for us. Or you can actually even better, add a comment and put your scenario and say, this is why I need this feature, and this is how we plan to use it because our customers do this, or we needed to work like that because of that. So all of those details really help us out. Now, somebody said, you didn't mention your commitment to Vue. Will this be as robust as Angular or React? The answer is yes. So, for example, if you go to js.devexpress.com, we've got these little logos here, and you can click on Vue. And for Vue, we have done a similar thing in terms of what we did for Angular. Is we took our excellent library of DevExtreme 65 plus components, powerful things like grid, pivot grid, chart, and so forth, and we wrapped them for Vue, and they work fantastically, which means that they've got all the great features, and we have documentation and demos. So all of what we presented today for DevExtreme, which is all these new drag-drop UI widget enhancements, this themes, this custom data visualization for charts, data grid enhancements, the new file manager, that is available for Vue as well. So you can see a lot of these, for example, here, the data grid enhancements, the drag and drop, you can see exactly what it looks like in Vue. You can hit the copy to sandbox, and this will actually package up that whole demo as a full separate application that you can launch and play with and download and change whatever you'd like right in the browser. So Vue is committed. We are supported. However, you might say, yeah, but this is what I was really looking for forward from Vue. Great. Let us know. Get over to our devextreme.vue thing, hit issues, and tell us what is it that you need from Vue. And that tremendously helps us out to form our roadmap, our plans, all that good stuff. So if there's something you don't see, let us know. In general, we'll tend to take a look and see where we can improve our products. But the best, of course, is to hear from you. Okay, is somebody asked, are there any major parameter changes, for example, the scheduler, so forth, two-part data structure? This is a change now marked as new in 19.2 in the documentation. Cassie, great question. You know, we are going to follow up with you on this. We have your information, so our support team is going to look into that and definitely get back to you. And is scaffolding function available in VS 2019? Absolutely. We are supporting VS 2019, .NET Core 3, all of that good stuff. As you know, with each of these frameworks, like Angular Ivy or the new Vue or any new versions, the frameworks that DevExtreme supports, the team works hard to make sure we, each of the devs that's supporting those frameworks, they are right there in step with the framework team to see what is happening, what's coming out, and we are developing against that. So usually when there's an update released by that team, very quickly afterwards, our team will release an update to support them, or we will likely support that ourselves as well. All right, so I think most of the questions have been answered. So Don, thank you very much, and let's hand it back to Julian.
Thank you, Mehul. All right, everyone. Like I mentioned before, today's webinar will be available later on our DevExpress YouTube channel. We have a couple more 19.2 launch webinars coming up tomorrow. Visit devexpress.com/webinars to register. We have one on dashboards and reporting, and the other one on the Office API suite that we have. So go to devexpress.com/webinars and register to attend those. And that's it for this one. Thanks to Mehul and Don. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.